Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the December 9th, 2009 public hearing of the Board of Architecture Review. I appreciate everyone in attendance here this evening. My name is Derek Wingfield. I'm the chair, and I'd like the other members present to introduce themselves if they would, please.
Nathan Billings.
Greg Hosfield.
Rob Magrish.
Thank you, gentlemen. The board was established by zoning ordinance in 1958. Our first historic district was Gratz Park, and we now have a total of 14 historic districts spread throughout the county. The board, which is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the Urban County Council, is a part of the Division of Historic Preservation. The Preservation Office maintains a full-time staff to assist you with your projects. The board encourages and recommends that all applicants use them as a resource. The Preservation Office is located at 101 East Vine Street in room 220. It is our procedure to consider applications in the order in which they are listed on our agenda. In each case, we'll attempt to sound the case, but if there are any questions from the board, the applicant, or anyone present, we'll open a hearing on the case. When we open the hearing, we'll have a presentation by the staff and hear any additional comments from the applicant. The board will then ask questions or make comments regarding the application and then hear any comments from any other interested parties. The chair will then ask the board members to enter a motion. If you wish to address the board this evening, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the public record. I'd also ask that you please write your name on the sign-in sheet by the door so that all the information may be recorded correctly. I'd like to note the following staff approvals before we begin our review of applications. There are many items that staff can approve, eliminating the necessity for most applicants to appear before the board. There are a total of 17 approved applications noted on today's agenda, and I'll need to read those quickly into the record. In the South Ashland Central Avenue Historic District at 125 South Ashland Avenue, install storm windows. At 132 South Ashland Avenue, remove tree, and at 637 Central Avenue, enclose yard with fence. In the Aylesford Historic District, there are three cases. At 332 Aylesford Place, renovate structure. 137 Ransom Avenue, renovate structure. And 344 Transylvania Park, replace storm windows. In the Belcourt Historic District, there are a couple. At 603 Bonesboro Avenue, renovate structure. And at 509 Russell Avenue, replace sidewalk. In the Cadentown Historic District, at 662 Caden Lane, renovate structure. In Fayette Park Historic District, at 428 Fayette Park, renovate rear porch. There are a couple of staff approvals in the Seven Parks Historic District. At 110 Barberry Lane, renovate garage. And at 321 and 323 Dantzler Court, re-roof structure. There are two staff approvals in the South Hill Historic District. 235 South Limestone, remove tree. And at 239 South Limestone, remove dying tree. In the Constitution Street Historic District at 146 East 3rd Street, replace rear doors. And finally, in the Western Suburbs Historic District, 737 West Main Street, install gas meter. And at 708 West Short Street, remove trees. All of these applicants have their certificates of appropriateness, and will now proceed with review of applications for certificates of appropriateness. Our first case this evening is in the Woodward Heights Historic District at 370 Merino Street, install storage building. Is that applicant present? Sir, if you'd like to come forward and give us your name and address, please.
And I'll use my work address since this is a government-related matter.
That's fine.
Frank Green, 219 East 3rd Street, here in Lexington.
Sir, thank you very much. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff's findings and recommendations regarding this case?
Yes.
Are you in agreement with them?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll read just quickly for the record, I'll read the staff's recommendation. Staff recommends approval is submitted with the following conditions. One, that the skirt board beneath the structure be of solid material similar to hardy board in lieu of wood lattice. And two, final details of the proposed skirt board material be submitted to staff for review prior to the purchase of any materials. Let's see if any of the board members have any questions for you, sir. No? Is anyone in the audience here to speak to this case this evening? Don't see anyone. Certainly entertain a motion regarding this case, please.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to case number 13020370-A at 370 Marino Street, I move that the COA be granted with the staff recommendations included.
Thank you, Mr. Hosfield. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you. You all have a good day.
Thank you, you too. Our second case is in the South Hill Historic District at 372 South Mill Street. The scope of the work is to change entry doors and transom. The applicant has requested a postponement until the January 13th, 2010 hearing. Could I have the motion to that effect, please?
So moved.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you. Is anyone here to speak to that case this evening? 372 South Mill Street? Okay, don't see anyone.
Staff would just note that the deadline for action on this case is January the 11th. And so we will need to do an extension, and we will prepare that and get both the parties to sign it, you as chair and the applicant.
Thank you very much for noting that, Ms. Kerr. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, our next case this evening is in the Constitution Street Historic District at 312 North Limestone. The scope of the work is to widen alley and exit driveway opening. Is that applicant present?
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Rena Wiseman here for GCL Properties, that item number 3.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wiseman. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff's findings and recommendations?
Yes, we have.
Staff is recommending approval as submitted. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, we are.
Excellent.
Very much.
Let's see if anyone on the board has any
Okay.
questions for you.
Hopefully this is the last time you'll have to be before us on this.
We hope so. We're moving forward.
Excellent. Is anyone in the audience here to speak to this case this evening? I don't see anyone. If anyone would be willing, I'd certainly entertain a motion regarding this one, please.
Mr. Chair, in reference to case 11660312-H at 312 North Limestone, I'd like to make a motion to approve the COA as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Magrish. Is there a second to the motion?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Hosfield. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you
all.
very much.
Thanks very much.
Our next case this evening is in the Northside Historic District at 430 West 3rd Street. The scope of the work is to change roof design. Is that applicant present? Excuse me.
Richard Comley, 430 West 3rd.
Thank you very much, sir. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff's findings and recommendations?
Yes.
Excellent. Staff's recommending approval is submitted. Is that okay by you?
I fully agree.
Absolutely. Great. Let's see if anyone has any comments or questions for you, sir. Gentlemen?
I don't.
It's not about the roof, but I do have a question. Did you have an issue on the brick wall on the backside of this property at one point?
It's on my side.
But it's the neighboring property's
Yes,
application?
I would love for him to finish.
Has that been
the
resolved
backside.
yet?
Well, it's not finished yet.
Okay. Have you talked to staff about that and made them aware of the situation?
Well,
The staff is aware.
they're aware of it.
I just knew that was an issue out there. And
Yeah.
Right. And I believe the owner who's doing the construction of the wall, is intending to do that and so forth. So it's not a matter of if, I think. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, I mean, under the application and the CO, I mean, he has to do it. It's not if he does it, it is a matter of when. I knew there was an issue about it. I just didn't know what the status was.
I
And because
hope
this was
it gets
before us
done,
tonight, I
too.
wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
we addressed it for you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I have no questions about the actual application tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Anyone in the audience wish to speak to this case this evening? Okay. Don't see anyone. Would entertain a motion regarding this case, please.
Mr. Chair, in reference to case number 188-00430-D at 430 West 3rd Street, I'd like to make a motion to approve the COA as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Magrish. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you
Sir,
very much.
Thank you very much. Our next case, let's see, is at 621 West Main Street. The scope of the work is to expand a deck and add to remove fencing. The applicant has requested a postponement until January 13th, 2010. Is anyone here to speak to that case this evening? No. Okay. Would certainly entertain a motion postponing that case, please.
Just a question. When's the deadline for this one? It went in my packet.
Since we knew in advance this one was not going to be requesting a postponement, we don't have the staff report in the packet. So I think the thing to do would be just, if it is necessary to do an extension, staff would also carry that out.
Okay.
And thank you for mentioning that. And we would do the same as we're doing with the other, prepare it and have the chair sign it and have the applicant sign it. So
Thank you.
we will do that if it's necessary. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we'll postpone this to the January 13th, 2010 hearing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Billings. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Hopsfield. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. This closes our formal portion of the hearing this evening. We'll now move into the conceptual review. The first conceptual review this evening is in the Aylesford Historic District at 229 Kentucky Avenue. The scope of the work is to install new openings, porch, and construct new second-story addition. This is a much more relaxed sort of phase, and usually what we do is the staff will present the case so everybody is familiar with the project and the site, and then usually the applicant will come up and talk about it, and we'll just sort of have a back and forth and try to thresh out some ideas. So if staff would.
Kentucky, please. This is the property at 229 Kentucky Avenue, and the owners of this property are interested in doing work to the structure to sort of make some corrections that had been done to the property many years ago. This house had sustained a fire, and it had reduced the pitch of the roof. In addition, there's also a one-story addition in the back that they would like to try to fix a water issue. So at this time, in doing so, they would like to do the new openings, install a porch, and to create a new roof on the back. And just to walk around the property here, you can see that this was had a larger pitch that maybe had been truncated. It also, from the Sanborn map, seemed to have a full width porch that was spanned across the front of the building. The part of the proposal is to change these windows to be equal sizing to each other, and to install new windows. These windows are not original to the structure and been replaced at the time the fire had occurred, which would be probably the early 80s, late 70s. In addition, there would be some, I think, one new window opening on this side. And you can see the one-story addition starts back in the rear. This is the rear of the structure, and this is where the applicant's having many troubles with the water issues. This is an all-flat roof. Sort of a view of the roof that you can see. The siding on this house is vinyl siding with masonite, and the new addition would be proposed to be hardy plank, and he intends to try to retain the vinyl at the moment. Some window replacement has been done, has been issued at staff level, and then new openings would be part of this plan. The guidelines are included in your staff report. Since this is a conceptual review, staff has no findings at this time. However, items to be considered would be, is the porch appropriate to the structure? Is it appropriate to raise the roof of the main structure? Is it appropriate to construct the second-story addition? Can we have the plans? Okay. Is it appropriate to raise the roof of the proposed addition higher than the main structure? Does the new addition have the same number of stories, or is it with 10% of the average height of the existing adjacent building? Does the new addition's roof line step down from the peak of the existing roof line so that the existing main roof line remains evident? And is the complexity of building forms shade compatible with the existing adjacent buildings? As you can see, this is what the applicant's proposing. These plans, I think you can see a little bit better because you have them in front of you. And so they're proposing to make a higher pitch on the roof and then to create, there we go. Battery's dying. Create new gables on the side that would be consistent with the new roof changes, and to install a couple of new openings. We can go to the next plan, Randy. And this is on the driveway side. In the rear of the structure. So to continue with the findings, is the addition smaller and simpler to the original building in scale, design, and placement? Does the articulation of details and articulation of new construction relate in scale, rhythm, proportion, and texture to existing, adjacent, and surrounding buildings? Did the proportions of the directional emphasis and rhythm of the new buildings reflect the predominant proportion, emphasis, and rhythm of existing, adjacent building surrounding structures? Are the openings compatible in scale, size, and proportion to the established patterns of openings in the existing, adjacent, surrounding buildings? Are the materials and scale to the building which they are located and compatible with materials in existing, adjacent, surrounding buildings? And the applicant are here. So.
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong. If you all like to come up and, excuse me.
My name is Steve Stone. I live at 601 Autumn Lane.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Would you like to tell us about the project anymore?
Well, I just really don't see any historic, it's in a historic area, but it just doesn't, there's nothing historic really about it. I'm trying to figure out what to do with the property. I'd like to blend it back together. The challenge is the roof structure. It's you know, on top there, there's a lot of, it's just been cobbled together. It was done before I bought it. I bought it in '03, and I've redone the electric, put new electric service in. I was worried about the systems, the electric, the furnaces. There's normally it's a challenge for me to figure out what to do. I brought in an architect, a guy named Doug Edwards. Unfortunately for me, he couldn't be here tonight. The problem I have in the back is blending it together. I've had to replace part of the ceiling in the kitchen when I bought it, and then 2 times since. The only way I can come up with is just to, when you talk to an architect, they just blanket the roof, pick it up, and then that brings up some height issues. We tried to pull it down in the back. We put a hip. You put a hip in the back of it. I'm sensitive too about windows. I like to switch out whatever windows I can. One issue I would like is the reveal on the masonite in the back. It's pretty substantial. Like, come up with a little siding, the hardy plank siding, try to mirror the reveal in the front. I personally like to have a porch or in the back, or in the front and the back. It's come up. We've sketched it out as a deck in the back. I feel that's a significant to get out of the upstairs in the event of a fire, something like that. Architect, he made some pictures, and if you can look through those, you'll sort of see what I'm talking about in the front and the back. The front is very plain to me. It needs to have a soffit. And then I guess the porch over the entryway, we've bantered about over what to do. As it exists, I have some issues with it. It's off kilter. It's slanted to one. I mean, it's square. I mean, the pitch isn't even.
Yeah.
And then, so that begs the question: what do you do? And at one point, I wanted a porch, first floor and second floor. And talking with staff, I don't think that's going to be available to me. So I just went with a first floor porch. If you got any recommendations, that's why I'm here. I'm all ears on this one.
Well, thanks for introducing it to us, and
Okay.
let's see if any of the board members have any suggestions for you. Mr. Housefield?
I was listening to what you said, but I was also looking over the list of questions that the staff has included for our consideration in the review here, or in our discussion. And a couple that really stand out to me is the porch, the front porch, which, looking at the Sanborn maps that we were provided, we see that there was a porch that did go across the front of the structure before on 229 and 233, the adjacent structure. So having a porch there that does that is not so far-fetched. The execution, we'll have to find some precedents for, how you want it to appear. If there are examples similar to the porch that you're proposing in the neighborhood, or, if the porch is still intact at the neighbor's house, 233, that would help make your case for the type of porch you would like to add. So I would consider that moving forward with your design. The other overwhelming thing that I see in your proposal is just the sheer size and bulk of the addition. That's usually a pretty big sticking point in applications and in conceptual reviews, where we are concerned with the addition overwhelming the original structure, as well as does the addition plus the original structure combined exceed what's in its surroundings, the adjacent properties and neighborhood properties. I understand the need to put a new roof and a better pitch than what's there and support that on the original structure. What I guess if you'd care to explain, why does the roof for the addition have to be so much taller?
Well,
Because that's, like I said, that along with the bulk, the height of the roof additions
if we go to
are big talking
go
points.
to the rear photograph, one, I guess it's I really don't care.
Okay.
I mean, I really don't. I mean, I want to cover the.
I'm all for
I have to go from end to end,
Sure.
and then this is what we've come up with. I mean, if there's a better one, I'm pencil it in and I'll do it. But if in the sketch that I brought from Mr. Edwards, when you go from the end to end, in order to pick up the front and carry the ridge line toward the back, you end up with a misalignment from the front gable to the back. You'll see that in the front elevation where the gable, where he sketched the gable up, and then you can see where, in order to catch the width of the property in the back, it just goes up higher to keep the slope.
And I would certainly, pursue matching the slope on the addition to the slope on the front of the house, or the original structure with its new roof. I just wonder, it's really three major issues that contribute to such a large and tall roof on the addition. One of which is the width of the addition. With that width, and then you put the pitch that you're proposing, yes, the peak is going to be much higher than the structure in front. I wonder if by meeting the typical requirement of having a smaller addition, you aren't able to reduce the width of the addition, which reduces the starting points of the edge of the roof, which moves the height in. It's just one thing off the top of my head, because I think one of the things we're going to come back to throughout the conversation is just the sheer size and bulk of the addition. And that's...
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, in terms of the footprint of the property, I'm trying to blend the roof structure together the best that with what you've got to work with. I mean, I'm not adding on to the back in terms of coming in with some type of addition there. I'm just basically trying to blend this roof together. And I've had a couple architects over look at it. It's a challenge. I mean, but to leave it the way it is, I think I just.
Well, I don't think anybody on the board is upset with the idea of removing the original and changing it, or what your effort is a good one. It's just, can we all agree on the best thing to move forward with?
Thank you, Mr. Hosfield. Mr. Magrish?
Well, I think that you certainly have a challenge here. Obviously, the way the house was rebuilt initially was maybe not the most aesthetically pleasing solution. I think that what you're trying to do here and where you've gone so far is really good. I think that, as Mr. Hosfield was saying, there are some issues. The roof is going to be very difficult, and I understand that you're not expanding the basic footprint of the house in any way. And because of the configuration, it doesn't lend itself to sort of a simple roof solution. But also, I think you can use it to your advantage. And if you and your architect sort of look at other houses in the neighborhood and other houses of the same period around Lexington, a lot of them have sort of complex roof forms. And you might be able to just sort of work with some of those prototypes to help make the final solution for this particular resident. I think that the front porch is fine. The thing that I have a real problem with are your proposed columns on the front elevation. They're just not really right. They're way too small and sort of look like pencils. And they are of a style that is not really of the same period of the house. I think you need to look at sort of beefing those up a little bit. And again, there are lots and lots of prototypes on Kentucky Avenue, all through that whole neighborhood. If you'll go and look at porches and look at the types of columns that are used, I think you'll get a better idea of something that is that actually just looks a little bit more substantial and will be a better, more aesthetically pleasing solution as well as being a little bit more appropriate to the house. For me, I think that pretty much everything else is in order. I would say that if you're going to go to the expense of changing some of the front windows, at least you might look at I'm looking particularly at the second floor window that's sort of on the angle, the 45 degree on the side. That I don't know what that opens into, but you might look at maybe making that one a little bit larger to relate to the one below it, just as a scale issue. Because I think at least on the front facade.
In the final one, because basically there's 3 windows left.
Right. And I would say that if you're going to go to the expense of replacing all these other windows, you may as well just go ahead and do them all and get a real get something for your money there.
In terms of I understand a complex roof, but you still end up with a second floor addition.
Well, I don't really think I don't have really a big problem with the second floor addition as it relates to the house to the right.
Two to the right.
Which is a full 2-story house with sort of a similar massing. The one to the left, of course, is a smaller scale, and I believe that is single story or story and a half. So I don't really have a real problem with the massing as it goes back into the property that way. I do think, though, that there may not be the perfect solution for this roof just because of the form of the structure without doing some major alterations, which you don't want to get into. But I think that you can maybe look at trying, if possible, to bring that back portion down just a bit or trying to incorporate it into the slope. A lot of times what happens, if you're looking from the front facade especially of houses of this period, there is a taller roof sort of to the rear, and you'll sort of see it sort of kind of pyramid up, but it's in the plane is the same. Does that make any sense?
Show me a picture, I'll get the guy to sketch.
Okay, well, actually, I think that if you meet with some of the staff, they have some really good records with some photographs of similar houses in this neighborhood and others of the same period that might illustrate better what I'm trying to say. If there was a way to be able to do that so that at least you would have that historical precedent to work from with the roof form, with a taller roof form to the rear, then that might be a good thing to look at. But, really, all in all, I think that what you're trying to do is really good, and I commend you for taking this on, because this house is another challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Magrish. Mr. Billings?
Thank you. I wish more people took houses that they look like this and try to redo them to add to their integrity or bring back the integrity of the structure instead of just letting them sit and rot or become vinyl boxes or whatever. So this is a great project. You have a massive challenge in trying to fix what has been screwed up before. So you're aware of that, and I applaud your effort in that. Thank you. And I think you're aware of probably the two biggest issues in this, which is the size of the addition and the roof, that you've got to, I mean, just coming here, you're already aware of those things without us having to say anything. On the roof line, the guidelines talk about additions in the rear have to step down from the main structure under design principle. Let's see what number is that. Page 100 of the guidelines says that addition roof line should be stepped down from the peak of the existing roof line, except the existing roof remains evident. I think, one, you've done a good job by basically raising the roof on the main structure. The Sanborn shows it, or the historic preservation report shows that this was a 2.5-story structure at one point. It doesn't strike me as a 2.5-story now. It strikes me as a 2 with a very shallow pitched roof. So I don't know if that means that it used to have a taller roof on it at some point. That's my guess. I don't know what the neighboring property next to it looks like, but I would assume they have it. If the original roof is still on it, they have a similar pitch. But it's clear that you're going back and looking at what it is. I don't know if the new pitch could be increased or if what you have designed here is adequate. But that may be one way to build into what your addition is on the back. You need to work with your architect to get that done. I'm not saying that's easy at all. I mean, it's sort of easy for us to second guess up here, knowing that you're already struggling with that. But the purpose of this tonight is to tell you these things so that when you go back to finalize your plans, come back to us, you're aware of what our thoughts are. And that roof line, in my opinion, has to be stepped down from that main structure. At worst case, it has to be in plane with it on a horizontal basis. I don't have a problem with the size of the addition in the back. It doesn't look like, my understanding is that you're not increasing the footprint of the building as it is today. You're basically taking off that one-story addition and making it two-story, and except where the decking is, and you're actually making a deck on the first floor and a deck on the second floor.
There is a deck already on the first floor, and I just want somebody to be able to get out on the second floor.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a footprint here for a new one or proposed, so my guess is it's the same footprint. Is that right?
Right. The upstairs deck is not as big. The upstairs is just a minimum amount to come out and be able to have a chair and
I don't want you to miss. I'm not worried about that new deck on the back. Yeah, I'm just talking about the actual footprint of the addition stays with the footprint of the existing one-story structure. You're basically going to build up from that. You're not going to take up any more. You're not going to increase the footprint of the building.
not an inch.
I don't have a problem with what you're trying to do. I think what I have seen in the designs here is that you're going to try to keep the existing vinyl siding in some places and add hardy plank in other places.
I felt like this would be a two-phase thing.
Okay.
I have, and this is Pandora's box here, money-wise. I mean, I felt like, well, I didn't even know if it was a go or not. I mean, at some point, I mean, I've thought about this for a long time, and then you sort of get stumped, be honest about it. And then you bring a guy in, and they, they get stumped. And then this guy, I felt like as I see what I can do with what we got to work with here, and then I'm chewing off a lot as it is, and then at some point come back, and I really don't care for the vinyl.
But I figured you did. I mean, the fact that you're trying to redo this tells me that the property has some use to you, but obviously you don't like it as it is, and you want to make it better.
I just like the street. I like the street. I've got. That's why I bought it. I mean, well, that's another story, but I just like the street.
Well, my encouragement would be if I couldn't find a guideline that said you have to, if you're going to add a hardy plank on a new addition, you have to change the vinyl in the old. I don't think you have to do that in the guidelines. I think that if it's economically feasible, you'll be happy with the end product if it is a consistent wrap on the building rather than having two different materials. I mean, obviously, you can't have vinyl on anything new under the guidelines, but there's nothing that mandates that you have to take off the old in order to do this. I think that you'll be happier if it is all consistent with each other, because you're going to have, even on your angles, you're going to have either gapping or overlays. It's just not going to look the same. And I know you're aware of that. That would be one of my encouragements as you try to do this.
I don't think I can bring this back to everything it needs to be. And I guess a lot of stuff, if money is no issue, maybe that's one thing. If money is at all an issue, if you can do it at one time, fine. If not, you do it in increments. And I know where I want this thing to head at some point. Ideally, what I really wanted was a nice porch in the front, first and second floor. And it's a great street. I mean, sort of like a Sycamore kind of thing, where you've got these porches up. That's what I was after. And because what I really wanted was a porch coming off the top and maybe French doors coming out, that kind of thing. But I don't think that fits the area, is what I've been told. And so that's a lead balloon.
I would agree with that. I mean, I would say that the purpose for tonight is for what you have planned to hear our input in, and if you have things you want to do in the future, you might use this a little bit for that. But I wouldn't come in here trying to sell. This is what I may do 3 years from now. Until you're ready to do that, I wouldn't do that. I will say that I think the porch is proposed on the front, going across the front and wrapping around the right-hand side, is awesome. I mean, it goes back to the original Sanborn that shows it was there. I think that a two-story porch would probably hide some of the front of the building, especially with what you're getting ready to do with the fish scale siding under the new gable. I think it might draw away from that.
I'm okay. I mean,
and maybe your French doors are better on that back deck instead of on the front,
Okay.
for use of the property. What I wasn't quite sure is I tried to look through all the. Do you have any new door openings, or are they just new door units in each of the original?
With the new door, let me see.
Obviously, there's one on the second floor of the addition to walk out on the deck because there's no door there now. But
That one, the one below that would be the left side of the elevation, the door just below on the first floor.
Okay, that's a new one.
Well, there's a sliding door there.
Okay, so there's
It's a 5 or 6 foot slide metal.
so there is an existing opening there, though.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But it's, like I say, it's, I guess, 6 feet, something like that.
And then the window in the front, you actually want to widen it to mirror the window below it.
I want them to match, yeah. But we're not making it any, we're maintaining the size of the first floor window and just making the second floor.
Is the second floor window original, or is it
I don't know.
has it been changed at some point to? I mean, my guess is originally the windows would have been about the same opening in parallel with each other.
Yeah.
But I don't have any pictures or evidence.
This
in front of
window
me.
on the second floor is, the only time I've seen it is in like a 1950s, it's a metal window, crank window, single pane, it's fixed, and then part of it, I guess it's the ends, there's three sections and the ends sort of crank out.
Okay.
But it's not original to the house.
That's what, and one of the concerns too is always, the guidelines don't favor new openings. And so that's why I don't know if staff has looked at the window to know. The windows to me look odd the way they are, and so as a general principle, we don't like new openings or expanding existing openings. In this thing, it seems to me that making that second floor window,
Back to the original.
yeah, I mean, I'm guessing, I don't know, but
no, it would be.
moving it over to mirror the bottom window is appropriate, but I don't know if staff has gotten to look at that yet, just so before you go too far down the process, we at least look at that. Just so you know that we don't normally favor new openings unless they're in additions or expanding openings. And I don't know, has staff looked at that yet? Do you all know?
Certainly, I think the second floor window is a later alteration.
Okay.
And it's very possible this house would have had another window opening on that second floor in terms of the proportion of solids to openings. So partly what staff will do when we're further down the road with this is a formal application. We'll be looking at some rhythms on some other structures of a similar character. The character of this house has been so changed overall, starting with its volume and its mass in terms of that roof alteration and all, that its relationship to its historic neighbors is pretty altered. And so I think that there's, you're not going to create a historic house again in terms of the exterior appearance on this. And so I think now the best approach is to get a good clean lines, appropriate rhythms of the openings to the solids, and appropriate roof pitches and so forth, but not try to articulate it as a full-blown historic house, because those elements are gone.
Overall, I think what you're trying to do is take something that's really bad and make it better, and not almost all the stuff you're looking to do. I don't have a problem with. The roof line is the main thing that I think just needs some attention. I don't think the scale of the addition in the back is a problem, except for the way the roof is tied into it. It doesn't bother me at all. I think that's the only way to do a two-story addition.
With a case of, on this, what strikes my eye when I look at this is you have this, maybe look on the right side elevation. It's, to me, it would beg for a dormer to come in there, and it would break it up a little bit. But, I don't know. If I did, I would have sketched it.
I would be hesitant to add more to the roof of the house.
Pardon me?
If we were to add a dormer, I feel like that would almost make the large roof more noticeable. I would be hesitant to do that, and that's not saying you can't sketch it out and try it. I mean, if it looks good, certainly let's talk about it some more, but my immediate reaction is, wouldn't that make the big roof bigger? And maybe that's something we're trying to avoid. I don't know.
I mean, it would cost me money. I mean, I don't need to put it in there. It would just give it a little look. I mean,
The other thing I would suggest is, it looks like on the left elevation, you're looking at a new gable in with fish scaling on that as well. And looking at the front of the house, it begins to look off balance where you added the gable on the left-hand side, and yet the hips on the right. When looking at the front now, the roof lines are consistent. And looking at the proposed front elevation, there's a symmetry that seems to be lost. So I don't know that, unless you're adding that gable for a purpose.
Keep that back then.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm just not sure that I'm not sure it maintains the integrity of what you're trying to do.
That's fine. I mean, basically, we hipped them down and pull it down. Otherwise, it would just be standing strong. And then it's just in the back. I think the back, I have more problem with the back than anything. That and the front window. And then, well, once you start one place, and then it's like, where do you stop? And then, basically, when I first met staff out there, I was over the front window. And then I was like, well, if we're going to do it, might as well do it. And then,
If you want to go to Madison Place in the Woodward Heights Historic District, runs between High and Maxwell. There are several houses on the, if you're going down from High Street, it'd be on your left-hand side, that have the same kind of form and massing. They're mostly, in fact, they're all brick, so it's a different material. But they have, almost all of them have these sort of angled elements, walls that go and sort of angle with windows in them. There's different ways the roofs are handled up, at the angle. I think that they could, I don't mean to copy any of them, but they can give you a really good idea of where to go with the design. I think the big thing that it's just really sort of the way the massing is put together that seems to be this sort of sticking issue, and that is how, and those buildings have resolved that issue. I mean, resolved it 100 years ago or more, but you can. I mean, if you just look at those as a real prototype, then you might be able to find something that will really help you with this.
if you go to my rear elevation, this is I think this is the challenge Doug started with, and if you look And basically, I can see what we've done is we've just picked the corners and over to the right where the door is and gone straight up there and picked up there and went toward to the new ridge line. And on the left side, and that's just, he's blended it together. And there was nothing more than that. We just picked it up. I mean,
Is this a two-family unit residence?
actually, there's three.
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 And that will remain?
No, right. I'm not changing anything there.
Okay, so it'll stay as multifamily. It won't, it's not being restored back to a single family?
No.
Okay.
No.
The only other thought I have is looking at the left elevation. Probably historically, there wasn't a deck on the second floor up there. I don't know how that would. The deck actually, to me, with the scale of the building, looks diminutive. I mean, I think it looks too small. I think for scaling purposes, you may want to consider bringing that deck farther out with the footprint of the first floor porch. I don't know what it would look like. The purpose of this is for you to get our thoughts as we're looking at your preliminary designs.
You tell me where these properties are that you want it to look like, I'll see if I can do it. I mean, like I say, I'll do it in phases if the money gets out of hand, but I agree. I mean, ideally, one part I had was to have a covered porch. If you look at the rear elevation, right now that deck is on the right side. I had one scenario in my mind where on that back wall where those two windows are, there's no deck, but to step that back in. And then I've come out with a porch. It's on the same parallel plane as the back wall on the first level. And then I've got a covered porch. And then, I mean, that was my first thought, to have a covered porch that way, which is, in my opinion, better than a deck. I think it would look better. But the problem you run into there is, I know it's a large property, but I'm just trying to make a cohesive roof structure, what I'm after. Right now, you get up there, it goes in, it's a compound roof. But I guess this was, when we met staff at the property, we talked about it, looked at some looked at some concepts. The idea was to put something down on paper and come down here and be in front of you guys. I'll get him to try to do something. I mean, but would the concept of a porch on that left side of the rear elevation, would that, is that any appetite for that?
Can you repeat that?
On the rear, just basically have like I said, not stretching the back plane of the property, but recessing in from there on the second level. Would not be a deck on the right side, but on I may have sketched it somewhere. I mean, of course, I can make the deck bigger, but I'm trying to minimize.
I don't think you have to make the deck bigger. I don't want to get too far afield. I don't think I was saying you have to. I just was saying one of the things you talked about on the front was you wanted a two-story porch with French doors that walked out. I don't think it's appropriate for the front of this property. I think Mr. Maggers echoed that. But if that's an element that you would like for the house, for its function, I don't think it would be inappropriate on the rear if you wanted to make that deck a wider deck to allow something like that. the way it's drawn here, the scale of that looks very small to me anyway with the scale of the building. That would be a way you could incorporate that feature that you wanted to do in the front, which I don't think is appropriate, on another place that would also help balance out the scale of that, what looks to be probably a 4.5 or 5 foot by 5 foot deck. Well, actually 5 foot by 10 foot roof, maybe. So it would be a 10 by 10 or whatever the actual dimensions are. That's not to say that what you have here I don't think would kill your project.
Yeah.
Those are my reflections on what I think would make it a better project, based upon what the guidelines encourage you to do regarding harmony, scale, rhythm.
All right.
I think there are a few more details to consider at the front porch while we're talking about porches that may be, not a deal breaker by any means, but things that need to be considered before you get your application together. I'm not sure. You may need to run it by, as far as code goes, I think you may need a guardrail around the porch, so that's certainly a design element to consider. I think typically there's a call for some sort of lattice work underneath the porch. So these are, like I said, not deal breakers, but small things that need to be considered. The other thing I keep coming back to are, the mass of the size of the addition. Obviously, you're not increasing the footprint. That's great. But, and I understand your desire to have a second floor on the addition, but I think that's one of the things that's hurting the size of the addition is how much more there is now in the proposal than there was before you started. And you might, because it's going to be a question, people will ask how much more are you adding than what's there originally. You might get some square footage numbers together so we can have an apples to apples comparison of just what is being added onto the building. So we have that number to, the question will be asked, you'll have the answer, and then we can either discuss it if we need to, or the question will be answered and we can move away from it. That's just something that will help you whenever you do your application. So that's just some information you might gather, have in your pocket when the time comes.
Staff? Excuse me. Staff, would you like to make some comments?
Well, generally, staff would concur with much of what the board has already articulated. The roof situation is a driving concern in terms of that rising at the back problem, and I think there's got to be a way to, if enough rear addition is to be made full two-story, to accomplish that with a roof that would step down or at least be no greater than that front mass. So as board members have already articulated, I would urge further study of that. The appropriateness of raising what are the one-story portions to a full two-story, I do think Mr. Hosfield's concerns about how much volume is really going to be added to this structure is something that does need to be known a little more in terms of the square footages and so forth, because while the footprint, we certainly understand, is not increasing, it is adding a considerable mass coming out the back, and hence the overall volume's presence will increase considerably, and particularly with that kind of a roof mass rising above it. So that, I think, does need to be further looked at. In terms of the design approach to things like the columns and the shingle and the gable ends, I would caution you relative to the design guidelines to watch out for this putting something that mimics history. And the couple of the board members have mentioned this, but you really probably would do better to do just a nicely articulated square column, perhaps, or a simple round column. A Tuscan column would just go straight all the way top to bottom. You would get better scale in doing so, and also not be getting into territory that's giving it a style that the building hasn't had. So I think, the porch is fine as far as the concept of a footprint and put a front porch that wraps around. I think it helps this building in terms of its design and is within the guidelines, but I think your columns do need more presence, and they also need to be simple without ins and outs and that kind of thing, would be more within the guidelines. The fish scale on the gable ends, I'd say, is not within the guidelines in that it does bring a style to that house that we don't have documentation that it ever had. Now, pre the fire, this house may have had a gable end with some kind of a shingle ornamentation, but we don't have documentation of that, and short of that, I think that it contradicts the guidelines to try to introduce it. Plus, I think that you now, with the house as it currently is, you have a series of really very simple forms, very plain forms, and I would continue that concept and make your finishes simple rather than trying to make them more elaborate. The question that arose about the vinyl siding staying on it and the hardy plank addition, within the process, you certainly are able to keep what vinyl siding you have. There's no question it would be, in the ultimate end game, desirous to have it all come to be uniform and be hardy plank, but under the process's evolution, you cannot introduce new vinyl siding on it, so the portions that do become second story couldn't have vinyl siding, but you could continue on as a grandfathered in material, your existing vinyl. And I do understand that's an economic consideration. And so it would, in staff's opinion, be appropriate to have that continue on as an existing condition. The deck discussions versus porch, I think either consideration could possibly be within the guidelines, depending on how it's articulated. One caution on your rear elevation, I know there's been discussion about the deck. When you look at it from the rear, it intersects the opening on the first floor. The column of it doesn't, and so that should either, the staff's recommendation, come all the way out to that corner or close enough to it that it doesn't bisect the element of the door opening in a line of vision sense, or become a smaller deck somewhat and come up perhaps somewhere in that range where you have the solid wall between the door and the window would help that. And then when you look at it from the left side elevation, it does hug very tightly the door opening on the first and what will become the second floor door opening. So you may need another 6 inches or 8 inches or a foot to the left, if you will, as you're facing those openings, the one that will come to have 2 openings in that plane, just to give it a little ease. And it just as a matter of inches, I think, it doesn't have to be a huge enlargement. So wherever you have columns coming up, you have a bit of that challenge on your front porch, where the column is drawn currently bisects the one of the 2 double windows. I think the double windows are fine in terms of the guidelines. Using that existing opening width and making them more appropriately scaled, even 1/1s, and then continuing that concept on the second floor certainly is appropriate, I think, in that situation. You have taken on a very challenging property. There's no question of that.
Well, I'm either going to do, I could sell it, I guess. Placement of the columns, that's no problem.
Yeah, those are small
The size,
adjustments.
Those are details.
that's nothing to me. Switching out the older windows that we haven't switched out, that's nothing. But sort of a deal buster is the second story addition. I mean, I guess I can stop if I can't eliminate my water problem, I haven't fixed anything. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say, when you have a chance to discuss proceedings here with your architect, see if if he could develop a scheme where the rear addition would be considered a story and a half, meaning you get more or less, you get a full story, but it's actually within the roof, the roof mass on that rear wing. So you could gain the square footage that you're looking for, but it would be, you wouldn't really be going up. You would have probably a new roof structure back there to deal with all your water problems, but you could develop that roof so that basically you're making a usable attic in the rear wing, which brings everything down, brings the scale down, but it still gives you the additional square footage on that second level. So, he might be able to develop a scheme for you that doesn't have to alter your plan terribly, but in elevation and visually, the back of that house becomes much smaller and much more in keeping with what the historical precedents are.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's saying that you can't put a new roof on the addition, whether it's 1-story or 2-story. We don't want to keep you from doing that. Clearly, the roof that's on there doesn't have much pitch and has caused you some troubles. There's certainly room. In the same way you're adding a new roof to the front portion of the house, the whole house, there's certainly room to do that on the addition. We just encourage you to find a way that is more congruous with the rest of the house.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any additional questions for us?
No.
Is anyone in the audience here to speak to this? Okay. Thank you very much, sir. The next conceptual review this evening is in the Belcourt Historic District at 124 Forest Avenue. The scope of the work is to demolish a garage, construct a garage, and construct new steps.
This is the site at 124 Forest Avenue. Here's sort of the existing 3-story deck and the existing garage. This is the existing garage. It is a T111 with a rolled-up metal door that sort of has a smallish opening that is hard to use for the applicants, and they're proposing to demolish this garage and construct a 2-story garage, or 1.5-story, 2-bay garage. Sort of to get you familiar with the yard, and this is looking from the rear yard to the site. And part of the proposal would be the garage would be located in the same direction or same location. In addition, the applicants would like to construct a new set of stairs from this location. In the new garage would have a studio with a deck up top, and the stairs lead from the new garage studio to the second-story deck would be combined. We can go to the plans, Randy. Here's the site plan. This is the second-story deck, and then this would be the deck for the garage, and this is the 1.5-story studio. This is existing size of the existing garage, and you can see the 2-story would expand out into the yard. We can go to the next plan, please. This is looking from the rear, at the rear elevation, side of the garage, rear of the house. So this is the studio, and the studio does not have access to the garage below, so the exterior stairs would be the only access to the deck and the studio on the second story of the garage. Guidelines are included for your reference. Since this is a conceptual review, we have no findings at this time. However, some issues to be considered would be, is the new stairwell appropriate? Should the new stairwell be located somewhere else? Does the proposed design disrupt the historic pattern of the neighborhood? Does the stairs connect to the garage in a manner that is characteristic to Belcourt? Is the location of the proposed garage appropriate? Are accessory buildings located in character with the secondary buildings for the street, near an alley, or at the rear of the property not close to or attached to the primary building? Is the complexity of the building form and shape compatible with the existing adjacent building? Does the architectural details and articulation of new construction relate in scale, rhythm, proportion, and texture to existing and adjacent surrounding buildings? Does the new building have the same number of stories, or is it with 10% of the average height of the existing and adjacent garages? Is the setback consistent with other structures on Forest in Belcourt Historic District? Does the proportion, directional emphasis, and rhythm of the new building reflect the predominant proportions, emphasis, and rhythm of the existing and adjacent surrounding buildings? Does the roof of the new building relate in shape, pitch, materials to the roof of the existing and adjacent surrounding buildings? Are the openings compatible in scale, size, and proportion to established patterns of openings in existing and adjacent surrounding buildings? Are the materials in scale to the building to which they are located and compatible with materials in the existing and adjacent surrounding buildings? And the applicants are present.
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong. Excuse me. If you'd like to come up and please tell us about your project.
Hi, my name is Robin Campbell, 124 Forest Avenue. The most helpful drawing to look at is going to be the full site plan. And I wanted to start by giving you kind of an overview of our design process. The house is a duplex, and it has a rental unit on the first floor, and we live on the second and third floors. And our two main objectives for the project are to build a larger, more practical garage. The garage that we have is not big enough for a mid-sized car, only a very compact car, and the octagonal shape doesn't really allow you to do very little else in there. It's an 18 by 18 foot footprint with the corners cut off, so it's very small. And the other objective was to have a studio space in a more practical garage and direct access from our house to the backyard and the spa area. Currently, we have to go down an inside stairwell, a common stairwell that we share with the first floor tenants, and we go out a side door that opens onto Sayre Avenue and walk around the sidewalk, the existing drive, and then back to the spa where you can see us in the far right-hand corner. So it's kind of a hike to get to the hot tub. And we've always wanted a more direct access. We started thinking about adding a set of stairs off the back deck, but the space between the deck and the garage is a little less than 5 feet. It's very close to the back deck. So the only way to do a full set of stairs, it's a 13-foot drop, so it's going to be a long set of stairs, is to do it across the front of the deck, which would be directly in front of the tenant's view of the yard. So they would have to look through the steps, which we didn't want to do that. Changing the location of the garage is really not an option for us either. It's not cost effective, or the driveway is existing. It's a very small lot. We have a pond that's in the back corner that's pretty substantial pond with very large boulders that had to be carried in, and we didn't want quite that big of a project to move the entire location. So the existing location, I think, is the best most appropriate spot for it. Since the garage is so close to the back deck, every design concept that we worked with came out more efficient. It worked better to link the access from the back deck, the second floor deck, to the garage and then down to the ground level, which provided direct access to the yard, access to the garage, and move the stairs away from the back of the house so it didn't prohibit the view to the backyard from the first floor deck. The stairwell that I'm proposing would be screened by an enclosure underneath for storage. You can kind of see that on the, let's see, the front elevation as seen from Sarah Avenue. It's really the side elevation of the house, but it's the front elevation of the garage. So underneath the stairs, as they go back alongside the garage, would be screened and enclosed for additional storage. And so basically there's only about a 4 linear foot stair step kind of deck that would be attaching the existing deck to the garage and the deck area and then proceeding into the studio. And that actually could be screened also. There's some planting areas that are between the street and that stairwell that we could screen it with plant material. And I tried to keep the design simple, clean, contemporary lines. Seems to blend in well where I've seen it in many infill and urban projects. As you all probably know, Belcourt has a great variety of designs in its residences and many new accessory buildings that also have great variety, and additions that have great variety from very modern to, you know, in the style of the 20s when a lot of the houses were built. And I believe that the project would reflect the diverse character of the neighborhood. And I'm looking for any suggestions that you may have or any problems that you can see with the design.
Thank you very much. Let's see if anyone has any suggestions for you. Mr. Magrish?
I take it the existing garage was there when you purchased the property?
Yes. Built in the 70s, I believe.
Okay. It's kind of a cool little building on its
It's
own.
cute,
I
yeah,
understand
it's
it
very
doesn't
cute.
work, but it's kind of interesting.
Beetle.
Yeah, or smart car or something like that. I understand where you're going with this. I think that, you know, to have a usable garage is certainly something that you want to have, and the addition of a studio on the second level is certainly something that would be, I think the concept of it is something that would fit within the guidelines and within the neighborhood. I also understand that you're looking at something that's more contemporary rather than a traditional, traditional in appearance. I do know that the guidelines, like for new forms, to have reference to existing forms, and I'm not so sure if the shed roof, at least from the rear elevation, you know, looking towards the house, is the best solution. You might want to investigate just by looking around in the neighborhood and at other structures of the similar, existing structures of similar scale, how the roofs are handled. Honestly, if you want something more contemporary, I think that, and I'm not saying you would have to do this, but you might look at just even doing a flat roof or something like that. I mean, flat roofs are rarely really flat.
Right, just with less of a slat.
Yeah. And also the way your deck is sort of this extra piece sort of on top of a roof, I think it'd be much better to have that integrated into the structure rather than seeing, it kind of would appear as if like the deck was an afterthought. And since you're going to be building this as a single unit, you want the deck to be integrated into the structure. You want it to be intentional and to be, to really have relationship. The scale as it relates to the main house is a little bit of an issue because it just the main house has a very specific character to it, and I'm thinking that possibly the scale of the rear building might need to look to that a little bit more for reference.
As far as making it back to one-car garage, or?
Well, it's not really the garage. Scale, I'm thinking more sort of height and massing. It seems a little, I don't know, it just seems like it may need to be just sort of beefed up just a little bit.
Needs to be beefed up?
I mean, just...
You want more mass?
More mass? Yeah.
Well,
Maybe.
I mean, that's,
I have.
it's very, you're sort of coming down, and honestly, unfortunately, these drawings really, it's hard to tell the relationship between the front, how the addition is going to work, the new garage is going to work with the existing building. You kind of drew it in on this one photograph, but I'm guessing that's not to scale.
I don't know.
On this one?
Well, you're just closer to the garage. You can kind of see on the garage side elevation. Of course, you can't see the whole house.
Right.
I think one of the things that makes the garage seem smaller in size than the original house is the roof. It's all building with no roof from the driveway view of the garage compared to the house that has a roof. Because the roof slopes away from our view, we don't see it, so it hides out behind this facade. And we lose, I think, we lose that chance for the garage to connect to the house itself by taking the roof away from this view. It's just an opportunity, I think, to relate the two together, and it might help with the mass problem, too, that Rob is
How would you suggest that the roof be done? I
don't know.
That's
I don't know.
looking for ideas.
Is there, instead of sloping in one direction, is there a ridge that can be added that slopes part of the roof towards us in a manner similar to the house, which I guess would mean
Yeah, I could probably, yeah.
tipping the edges. It's something to consider.
I think that this has a certain complexity to the design. The site and the existing conditions give a certain complexity, and I think that your attempt to do something simple and clean and so forth you're on the right track, absolutely. But I think it just needs to have a little bit more reference to the area, to the existing house, to the elevations, floor heights, things like that. Because it's a fairly large addition to the site. Compared to what you have there now. So you're going basically from sort of a small garden structure, a summer house, to a full-fledged, 24 by 26 building, 2 stories in height. So the increase in scale is definitely needs careful attention so that it relates to the structure and to the site, the existing structure and the site, without just being this sort of alien body that plopped in there. So I think you're on the right track. I just think that you need to sort of look at prototypes. You need to look at sort of the way details are handled and how the overall new structure integrates itself into the existing landscape.
Thank you, Mr. Magrish. Ms. Trustfield?
A few more, just little thoughts. So I'm pleased with the size and location and plan. I don't have any issue with that at all. I agree with Mr. Magrish and his thoughts on relating the addition to the original structure more closely. And like I already mentioned, maybe the roof, there's a chance for that to be part of the relationship that ties the two together. The other thing that I think separates the two, and maybe some more attention can be paid to the design that would help tie the two together, are the windows and glazing. The large glass double doors, those are big glass openings that don't relate well to the house.
They would be, that's not really a good representation. What I had in mind is on the third floor, which I don't know if you were able to see it on the pictures, there's a triple sliding glass door, which we're going to change, and we've got staff approval to put in French doors, contemporary French doors with a third stationary door. And that's exactly what these would be, same.
Well, that will help.
Yeah, they would be the same as on the house.
But I think that's another chance to, you study those openings and find a way to relate them more to the house while maintaining some sort of relationship to the openings directly below with the garage doors. Maybe there's some lines you can align there that will help so it doesn't look like a first story and a second story. It can be one whole facade, not two separate facades stacked on top of each other, so they can relate to each other vertically.
The first and second story of the garage?
Yes, the garage door openings, their size. If there's a way to relate that size to what's above it, some direct relationship, because you're always going to see those two together.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about changing that to just one wider door, like a 16 or 18-foot garage door.
I don't
know if that would accomplish that or not.
My preference is for the two doors, just because I think two smaller doors relate to the house better than one really large wide door. I think that takes it farther away from the original structure as far as relationships go.
So you're suggesting just making those garage doors more the size of the doors, the French doors that would be above on the second floor?
Or sure.
Or vice versa.
Vice versa, yeah, sure.
Or you could put surrounds, you could frame up those garage doors
Yeah.
so that
just
their
a vertical
framing
start.
sizes relate to above. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're in the right direction.
So that you don't end up with more door volume, but you end up with a frame setting that would align.
I see.
That's what I believe your comments are reflecting. They're looking for vertical alignment of the first and second floor openings. Excuse me. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. And because the face of the studio is set back so much further than the garage, it may not ever be a perfect view, but it'll be closer.
I see, yeah.
The other thing that occurs to me, that there's a lot of guardrail wood on the back of the house as it is, that exists. And now this new guardrail that's being added, it's all necessary. You have to have it. But I wonder if there's not a way to help keep that from overwhelming that area. I mean, the backyard's going to start to look like the Ewok village soon, with various planes and bridges and connectors and stairs. And, I would hate for that to happen to you.
Did someone dare you to say Ewok in the meeting tonight?
No, it was just my good luck. So I don't know if there's a...
Yeah, unfortunately, it is a requirement for anything that we have
Well,
out
that's
there.
I know, but is there a darker paint or stain for the wood, or is there the possibility for using wire guardrails in between that helps take some of those lines out of there, that
Maybe.
really noticeable bulk Which would be a nice modern element,
Absolutely.
too, I think. So that's a thought, too.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like
And then
that.
there's a code issue of storing things under stairs that you may consider
Oh, really?
not storing things under the stairs.
Know that.
Not that we're a code reviewer, but I think they would tell you the same thing.
Okay. Check into that.
And the other thing that Rob mentioned briefly was it would help make your case, I think, when you get your COA put together or your application together, to show more of the original house in your drawings,
Okay.
to help us understand how it does relate scale-wise. And, you know, it's going to tell on you if it's small or big. So
Show it
certainly in
in
your
more
design, you're
of
going to
the-
see it too, and it gives you a chance to work towards that relationship. So I would at least show the major outlines of the buildings, all the major vertical edges, and the roof line, the
Okay.
roof massing, just so you can start to see the whole size of what you're connecting to. That would help me understand the true scale and relationship, the mass between the new building and the existing building.
I see.
Those are all my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hosfield. Mr. Billings?
I don't have it.
Staff?
Not at all.
Just before staff goes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut in. Recently, we had I think it was a conceptual review also for a very similar project, I believe also in Belcourt, where there was an existing garage and basically they were adding a second floor to it. I can't remember the address of that.
It was on,
Maybe it was on Ford?
About the one where they wanted to add the garage to the house?
No, it was a
was set back-
separate building.
It was set back just barely from the house with
Yeah.
with a 5-foot or 6-foot breezeway.
Right, and anyway, I can't remember that. I'm sure staff probably has that on file somewhere. That is a very similar project to this, and they had a very interesting and very contemporary solution to it in the way the massing was held and all that. And I mean, it needed a little tweaking here and there, and I'm not saying that it is perfect, but it just came to mind that it was almost identical
Really?
in concept to what you're talking about here. So it might not be a bad idea to take a look at that.
I will.
To see how that was
That
handled.
information.
There are some factors to consider. If you look at that, just that their connection was interior. It was not an open air, go outside and then go inside situation. It was a weathered-in bridge between the house and the addition. But there are certainly some ideas there to draw on as far as real slick, modern lines. It was a nice.
The overall design, I think, had the same intent that you have. And like I said, I mean, I don't mean just copy anything, but I think you can get sort of a good feeling of how a similar project was handled in that case. And it had some good elements and some things that needed some addressing, but it's just a sort of a prototype that you
Has
might
it
wanna
already
look
been approved? Is it?
no, it's.
at. No, it just went through the conceptual stage.
Okay.
But
Great.
I just can't think of the address, but it's right in your same neighborhood.
I'll have to look them up and have a conversation.
It is almost catty corner on the other side of the Bell House from where you all
It's
are.
on East Bell, I believe.
East Bell. 200
And
East
actually,
Bell.
staff had some substantial concerns about that design.
Yeah.
So staff and the board were not necessarily quite on the same wavelength,
Right.
how that fit the guidelines.
What I was really looking more at it as the architectural style, sort of a very contemporary look. So, I mean, that's sort of the point. As I said, it's not perfect, but it might give you some ideas.
Okay.
Relative to some thoughts from the staff's perspective on your project, the roof rising up, how do you have extra ceiling height in this?
It rises to about a 10-foot.
So you could lose a little of that?
Could.
What I'm wondering is if there's a way to consider having the peak stop a little less, pulled back a little
And
bit.
come back down?
And come back down.
That's what I was
And maybe
thinking.
have a portion of your deck, I don't know if you'd be interested in this, but
Well covered.
a portion of your deck have an overhang roof.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it would, from the street and your yard's angles, essentially then you'd be talking about, I think, a hip, because you could, if you make your peak here, you could have it hip in two directions, and overhang a portion of your deck, and make that deck a little more integral to the volume of the building, perhaps. So I was looking, is there a way to play with having that? And I think that might help the roof form relate more to the roof form of the house.
Yes, I
Something
agree.
to
Yeah,
give
that's a good
careful
idea.
consideration to. What just occurred to me too is once you start sloping that roof back towards the porch, now you've got to use a gutter.
You're going to need water control.
The downspout is going to really think about that downspout, because getting it back to the house and then down is, or not the house, but the face of the building and then down to the ground is always, if you don't plan for it, it looks real stuck on there and just messes up everything.
Right, and it could be, I mean, there's some alternatives for that, but that's an excellent point, that you need to think about the water control. But I think then, too, what that might help is on your elevation with your, if you have a roof form that comes
Back down.
toward the frontispiece, is that it would help soften the presence of so much glass, because some of that would become under the line of vision of that overhang roof. And I do think there's a disconnect in so much open glass up here with thinking about outbuildings in Belcourt. Most of them don't have that much glass. And speaking of solids to voids kind of thing, another issue, I think, is your first floor of your side elevation, that being towards your yard, has no opening at all. And that's a good bit of volume with no openings. Rhythmically, many of the outbuildings in Belcourt will have a window or two. They could be false windows, for that matter. You could do closed shutter concept or something like that. Now, I don't know quite that that's a great idea with such a contemporary design, but depending on how you handle it, just maybe to think about the rhythm of that. And then the horizontal window on that elevation, I was wondering if there's a way to flip that and put two very slender vertical windows, something that would, because everything on your rear elevation is vertically driven of your main house.
You're right.
And so I think one of the disconnects between the outbuilding and the main house is the horizontal banding of that proposal. So see if you want to think about maybe getting some verticality in your openings on the outbuilding instead. And we mentioned about maybe, some sort of trim surrounds and stuff to make your first floor openings and your second floor openings speak more closely to each other.
Do you think it would be better just to have double, just two regular French doors there instead of the triple? Would that help with
my
the-
sense is that you have an awful lot of glass
Yeah.
on that second floor, and that it is not congruous with the character of outbuildings in the neighborhood. But I think, yes, so I guess to answer your question, yes, maybe think about doubles. And because they're going to be in the two separate planes, that will help too, the fact that it steps back. But I think one thing that, in terms of character of outbuildings in the neighborhood, that the sheer change from where the one sort of floats above the roof of your first floor volume, it's accentuated by this harsh break. And if we can soften that, and I think a deck up there can be accomplished, but I think this sheer wall is startling relative to the relationship of it to your main house and to other outbuildings on the block. particularly thinking about that you're on a corner. You've got high visibility of this elevation, that being your Sayre Avenue elevation. You've got such high visibility of that elevation, given your corner location. So that'd be staff's suggestions.
Good to know.
Anyone else have anything? Have any questions for us?
Is there any problem with the connection from the deck to the garage?
I think you might want to study that just a little bit further to see if maybe it could come off the end of the porch rather than coming off from a bay of the center. Does that make?
One of the,
In this plan that you have here, you have it coming, sort of straight out here, the connection. If it could be here, I think that might be a possibility, or if there was some way to sort of handle that whole piece. That I think that it sort of slams into the historic structure in a way that...
my stairwell to go down has to be so long because of that drop.
Oh, I understand, but there
trying
might
to
be a way to have it, do the rest of it as switchback stair or something like that, I just think you might want to play with that a little bit just to see if there's a way to just push it off
Okay.
further, or even if it's still to the front, maybe if it's just pushed down.
Push back.
So it's not sort of in the, sort of slams into the middle of that bay of the existing porch of the historic structure.
Now, that plan doesn't match the plan on the first page, does it? Or does the deck overhang?
The deck overhangs.
Okay, because,
That's why. This is the front of the garage,
Right.
and this is
Yeah, the
actually
deck
looking
is
at the
20,
deck.
this
The
is
deck
26
overhangs
and-
by a couple of
gotcha,
feet.
yeah. Because my biggest concern when just looking at the first floor plan is that you've got one solid line of guardrail connecting, one plane of guardrail, but now that I look at the second floor plan, which is what I was looking at all along, I don't have that same immediate concern. I have nothing
Yeah,
to
it does
say.
drop back.
That's what I really meant.
Is anyone in the audience? Oh, go ahead,
I was
Sarah.
just going to ask board members, some interesting contemporary metal work would be really a way to handle that baluster.
On the back. See, I was trying to go with what we had on the house because that was an add-on that we did
Right.
and was approved for the house. So I thought I should keep the same thing that's already
There
been
was,
approved.
what was the name of that? It's on Main.
I have no objection to
Center
doing
Pass,
something more contemporary.
New Past.
Oh,
Up
New
on the
Past,
very
yeah.
top floor, they used some railing that was like airline hanger.
Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, Scott did
He
it.
was the architect for me on a project I've done before, so I will ask him about that.
I think, you may want
And there was another,
coloration tie-ins and rhythmic tie-ins perhaps, but I think you could get more transparency on your garage
I would love.
than would, now it may get cost prohibitive. Yeah.
Just one quick clarification. Oh, I'm sorry.
Forest and Main.
And that's both.
I'm sorry. You all added this porch to the main house?
No, we just put new railings up.
Oh, okay. So it's just the railing that was added?
Right. Well, it just had like lattice surrounding those whole things that, I don't know, what was there originally? It wasn't,
Okay. But the actual porch structure is original to the house?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Open that one up.
Hello, I'm Scott Campbell. I'm in the landscape business, and we're actually doing a deck right now that they're trying to look at on the back of their property. They have a creek and everything, and we've come up with, it's actually glass. You see them on Ocean, that type thing. Would that be something we could pursue? I've been looking into that a whole lot, and I didn't know it was going to be brought up tonight, but that would be total transparency, and you wouldn't even have anything but a rail that would show.
Frame.
It would be a frame with plexiglass that's clear. So is that something appropriate?
It could be the tensile tension wire? I mean, I think that there are lots of options for the ballast.
Dr. McGee's house on the corner of Bell and Main, it has the tension wire system, I believe, on the balustrade on the back deck that we approved 3 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah, they haven't gotten that far yet, though.
No, I mean, their plan's been approved, though. They're not that far in construction, but it's just another example of a Belcourt property
Yeah,
with a
it's gonna
very
happen.
contemporary design that we have already approved that has a non-traditional, it got away from the wood railing system.
And it has the tension wire.
I believe it was tension wire or...
Yeah, it's tension.
Possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
wire mesh panels, there are perforated panels made of metal, there are lots of things to
Going a
do.
little bit more contemporary there would be,
Well, yeah, that'd be okay, just,
I think it's more in how it's detailed is the real concern, and a glass rail, any of these things I think would be acceptable, but you really need to look at the scale and the detail.
I would give careful consideration or thought when considering the glass guardrail, just because of our previous statement of too much glass.
too much glass.
You know what I mean? And maybe there's a difference. I mean, maybe you look at some photographs of other installations and it doesn't read like, a window in the wall, but it's it won't come across that way, but maybe it could. So really study some photographs of other places where it's been used to see if it doesn't accidentally venture into causing the problems we talked about before with too much glazing.
Okay.
But you could also end up with some rhythmic breaks that relate to what's on your main house, but then maybe more transparency between those segments, so that it's not
It
quite
does
as
away with all those ballasts.
heavy in the big picture. But you don't want it to disappear to the point that then it looks like there's no connection between the two. So it's a very fine line, but I think you could have some fun with it and be very successful with it.
Right.
Thank you very much. And I believe
Okay, thank you all.
that, Mr. Billings, I might touch base with you on the conceptual review subcommittee.
I have nothing new to report at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. We'll look forward to speaking with you in the future, and would certainly entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make
moved.
that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for a wonderful 2009, and we'll see you back here in 2010, and happy holidays.